I believed my anger testimony would be the healer, but it was just the precipice to opening up the door and to explore and admit my depression. I'm aware it was always there, just under baseline, with its reliable monthly dips and occasional spikes, parallel to hormonal waves. I just couldn't explain what made it so heavy and reliably consistent, but now it's festering like an open wound. Between 13 to 18, I was not in an environment where I could feel safe or peaceful. I was in an environment I couldn't control. My stepfather was young and immature, 6 years younger than my mother, which made him 12 years older than I. He came with baggage. His oldest brother, who joined the priesthood, molested him and his two brothers. He had every right to be angry, but he took it out on us. He drank a lot, and we never knew which Dan we were going to get. Most of the time, we got drunk, angry Dan or critical Dan. My mother left my half-sibling's father, Roy, for Dan when I was 13. Roy and Dan worked together. I assumed Dan convinced my mother that life with him would be better than life with Roy. Roy cheated on my mother and had a cocaine habit. He ran a plumbing company, and Friday night payday would involve the entire company coming over to party, drink, and smoke pot, and probably snort cocaine too. The first time I saw my mother smoking pot, I got scared and I got very upset. I was in 7th grade, and in health class we learned that drugs were bad, and they mess with your mind and your ability to think and make good decisions. All she did was laugh at me. This made me more upset. I felt unseen, unimportant, like what I felt and needed didn't matter. Roy hit my mom once, before she found out about the affair. She cut all her hair off in response. She told me later that if he wanted to treat her like a man, she would look like one too. I understand why women go to extreme measures to prove a point. But really, what point does it make if you decide to stay and endure abuse and affairs? It makes a point that you believe you're not worthy of someone who is loyal and kind, who treats you like Christ loves the church. It shows the other person that you will tolerate anything, and then they get worse because they know you won't leave, for whatever reason. And then you teach your children to believe the same things about themselves, that they're not worthy of anything good. Low self-worth will tolerate anything. When Mom found out Roy had an affair with Yvonne, the co-boss's wife, it was all over. She planned to leave as soon as possible. That's her MO, to leave when things get tough. Just disappear in the middle of the night, no warning, no ties. Fit all your belongings in the back of your car and we out. But hold on, you might say. In one breath you say, if you don't leave, you teach your children to put up with things they don't deserve in their relationships. But then in the next breath, you're mad at her for that being her method of operation to not stick things out. Well, thank you for noting that. It's because I do have mixed feelings about it. I do not believe she should have stayed to tolerate drugs and affairs and occasional physical abuse. But I did love my brother and sister's father very much. He never treated me like a stepchild. And for a long time, subconsciously, I resented her for leaving that relationship and bringing us into a worse one. But reality is that she had no idea that that was going to happen that way, and then she probably secretly hated herself for doing that, and then not really having a way out this time. Her way sucked. I'm sure Dan made it sound real good to leave him with him because he was clearly insecure. Next thing I know, she's asking me who I want to live with, him or her. What kind of question is that to a 13-year-old? Of course I'm going to choose my mother. If I would have known what life with future Dan was going to be like, I may have chosen differently. If I actually could have made the choice. I wonder if she would have chosen differently as well. Hold on, I just remembered this tonight as I'm proofing this to print. Dan did show his butt before all this transitioning took place. He left his dog Copper with us, and I'm not sure why he had to do that. All I know is she became my dog and my best friend. She had a long pointy nose and a long body and a curly tail. I have no idea what she was mixed with. She was ugly, but she was my BFF. He came over one time with his white van before he got his red one, that I had to remember how the door sounded closing. More on this in a few. He was angry and grabbed the dog and threw her in the back of his van. We must have done something wrong, but I can't remember what that was. All I remember is being confused by his actions. I know that was going to make me cry, y'all. I learned that she died when I was in the military, actually. My first year in the military, I went home and visited my mom. She told me that my dog had died. And I was so upset because I carried that around with me, that I left Dan and I left home and I never came back to see my dog because he was there. And then when I found out she died, I felt terrible. I just felt like I should have gone to see her. I did try one time. He wasn't home, and I remember beating on the door and I could hear her barking, and I could put my hand through the mailbox, the little thing on those older houses where the mailbox slot is. I could put my hand in there, but my hand didn't go all the way through, so I never got to say goodbye to her. I didn't put that in here, but I'm crying about it, so I figure there must be something there. More on the sound of the closing door in a bit. He was angry, grabbed the dog, threw her back in the back of his van. We must have done something wrong, but I can't remember what that was. Was confused by his actions. We had a couple living with us at the time, and I remember the lady, Kelly, telling him that Copper was my dog, and that he should not be able to just come and take her because of fill-in-the-blank reason. So I remember he did bring her back. At least he did that. Dan was a ticking time bomb. We never knew what we were going to encounter from day to day. This causes anxiety when you don't know what to expect, when you can't plan for which Dan you're going to get. When you have to live in fear in order to survive, and you can't just relax in your own home as a teenager, you develop coping strategies in order to keep yourself safe. You start isolating in your room in order to avoid the monster downstairs. You might even use solo cups to urinate in so that you don't have to go downstairs too. You sneak out after everyone is asleep just to go on walks with your dog in order to create some sort of peace and control over your own mind and spirit. I wasn't doing drugs and I wasn't drinking. I was walking with my dog in the dark after midnight, and I was an attractive teenager. Creating a necessary peace for myself could have invited other dangers as well. Thank God it never did. Some lasting effects of that time period of my life is that I'm pretty sure I have undiagnosed misophonia. It's a condition characterized by an intense dislike or hatred of specific sounds. These sounds can trigger strong negative emotions such as anxiety, anger, and disgust. Symptoms might include intense dislike or hatred of specific sounds such as chewing, breathing, tapping, or clicking. Strong emotional reactions to these sounds, including anger, anxiety, or frustration. Physiological reactions like increased heart rate, sweating, or muscle tension, or avoidance of situations or sounds that trigger reaction. Also, side note, there are things such as sensory disorder things, and people who have gone through trauma a lot of the times have sensory issue. One of your five senses, whether it's hearing, smell, sounds, things like that. I didn't know that until I started counseling, and a client told me about it. So you can have symptoms like that you're bothered by certain senses. So it's not weird, it's a trauma response. Cause is unknown, but it's believed to be a neurological. It may involve abnormal response in the brain to certain auditory stimuli. I'm convinced that mine is caused by the fact that I had to listen for certain sounds in order to survive and keep myself safe. My sound became Dan's van door. In order to survive, I figured out the sound of that door when he would slam it closed. However, I don't think I ever nailed down the exact sound because every time any vehicle door would close, I would have Kayla and Roy, my siblings, run to the door, go see if Dan's home. And that's exactly how I would say it. This became part of our daily routine, a sound that would create both anxiety and relief. Anxiety that it might be him, and relief when it wasn't. If only the neighbors knew how meaningful in our lives those sounds would become. They were like house alarms, alerting us to any activity, which would also become a stronghold over becoming anxious or not over a car door being closed. Even though car doors were a sound I had no control over, the sound controlled whether or not I would be anxious. But why did I need to know the sound of Dan coming home? Or at least be warned of his incoming? If we knew he was home, we could prepare for our survival. I say that a little bit lightly. I don't mean physical survival, but mental and emotional. Knowing that he was home would allow us to scatter, hide, and get busy. My siblings went to their rooms, and I got busy doing dishes. I learned that if I got busy doing dishes, he wouldn't bother, criticize, or belittle me. It was one way to survive, or at least predict my environment, or at least its outcome, sort of. I could seemingly control the outcome if I knew he was coming, and somehow I learned that if I was appearing to be busy, I wouldn't be a POS in his mind in that moment. See me after if you don't know what that means. Let the cycle of sound begin a lifetime of anxiety and adverse reactions over particular sounds I can't control. My body treats this like a PTSD response. It responds the same to any sound stimuli. If it's a sound that is particularly unpleasant or unexpected, my heart races for about 5 to 10 minutes, and no amount of deep breathing helps me relax. Anytime I'm awakened by a person driving through the neighborhood with a ridiculously unnecessary amount of bass in their stereo, my heart races, and there will be no sleeping in for me on my day off. And I'm not a morning person, by the way, in any way, shape, or form.
That one.
That's important, it's later in the story too. Nothing ever was good enough for Dan. He would never actually complain about what we did, but he would make us feel small about what we did not do. I remember cleaning the house to the best of my ability one day, feeling pretty good about it, only for him to say, "Did you vacuum?" I remember that sinking feeling all too well, telling me that I had yet failed again without hearing those actual words. There was no pleasing this person. I was constantly reminded of the things I did not do, or that what I did wasn't good enough. I became that person as an adult. I'm never satisfied. No one and nothing is ever good enough for me. I'm always thinking about how things could be better and why they suck. I don't think I came out this way. I think it's just a result of being emotionally damaged. I don't try to be dissatisfied with everything in life. I just am. Every single disappointment weighs heavily on me as if it's a life-changing event. In the military, they say, "Suck it up." This is very similar to what my mother used to say when I was a teenager. She would just say, "Just be all right." I tried hard to do that, but I never was given the tools to just be all right. Everything that involved us being all right and okay was non-existent. I think this is why I struggled to ask for help. Maybe I was made to believe that doing things right had to come from my own ability to know, choose, and act. If I ask for help, that means I cannot do those things on my own. It means I'm weak. If I accept the help, this also means I'm not strong enough to do it on my own. And then when you fail, it leads to more low self-worth and defeat, because now you can't do it on your own or ask for help. And then, on the other side of this coin, if someone offers assistance, it appears as a threat, because they are now saying you're weak, because you need their help, or that you can't do it because you don't have the answers. See how this can become a dangerous cycle in your brain and lead to being angry and depressed? Well, we don't have to have the answers. We don't have to know anything. The Bible says that wisdom is good, but it's talking about the wisdom of God. When we ask for His help, He shows up in the lowest of places, unafraid to fight the battle when the enemy tries to put us down and keep us there. Vulnerability is a struggle of mine, and probably why I don't get close with people. Vulnerability was weaponized when Dan would sit us around the table and tell us all about our mistakes and flaws the last quarter. It seemed like a quarterly evaluation. We never knew when these evaluations were coming. We just knew that when we were supposed to sit around the table and he sat with us, and we weren't eating dinner, it was a time to be put down and belittled. And this was a form of discipline he used, I guess, to make us feel worthless in order to make himself feel better. As long as we were low, he was powerful. We would sit around that table for 2 to 3 hours, listening to how terrible we were and how awful our choices had been. I don't remember him mentioning anything specific about things that I did or didn't do. What I remember is being so angry while he was talking to us until I couldn't take it anymore and I would just cry. I would spend the whole time feeling so angry until his interrogation broke my spirit. I tried to hold back the tears because if he saw them, that would mean he won and that I'm weak. It wasn't vulnerability he was seeking, it was brokenness. So I had to be strong, or at least put up the front that I was, in order to protect myself from people. Because I lacked the strength in the beginning, people took advantage of my weaknesses, my inability to set boundaries, and my inability to find peace within myself and from God. Satan uses predators to prey on the weaknesses of others to provide a false hope which will lead us astray. They see a need that you have and convince you that they can provide it. When you go looking for love or anything else you naturally and humanly need in all the wrong places, you leave feeling more dissatisfied, more empty, more unworthy, and stupid for falling for these tricks of predators yet again. We are created in the image of God, and I'm still trying to figure out what that means. What I think it means is that we're supposed to reflect his image in everything that we do, which means his attitude, grace, love, peace, joy, and all the other fruit of the Spirit of Jesus. The image I often find myself still trying to hold on to is one of strength, independence, and power. Dan took these things from my mother, so maybe in an abstract way this is what I was taught, that I wasn't allowed to have these things as a woman. But I most definitely can have them, obtain them, and maintain them as a woman of God. But they should be reflected as a child of God who depends on the strength of God, depends on God's power to be channeled through this broken vessel by God and from his provision. The image that the world portrays is quite the opposite of what we can be reflecting as children of God. I struggle with this daily as a person who still needs to feel strong in order to protect herself, who needs to feel independent in order to survive, and who needs to be powerful to other women, a powerful image to other women. But I do believe there is a time and a place for all of these things, and with God, they will be reflected appropriately in his timing. We do have the intelligent ability to change our minds and choose to go in a different direction when we finally hear God speak and take his provided map and compass, his word. The event I haven't mentioned yet is one that started it all. I was 14 and it was October 4th, 1990. I had to do math earlier. Perhaps that was the weekend after my brother's actual birthday, September 28th. The part that stands out to me about that day is my mother had to go to work that evening. My brother had his toys all over the floor because, well, we had just celebrated his birthday. Before Mom left, I asked her if we should clean up. I must have known something about Dan's poor behavior and responses to make me ask her that. We had no idea it would result in what happened that night. She told us not to worry about it. That was probably the worst advice ever. She left for work, and shortly after, Dan came home. I think I had fallen asleep on the couch. I'm not sure how I got from wherever I was to the floor. Next thing I remember, I was on the floor with my back up against the couch, and Dan was straddled across me. He was sitting on my lap, facing me, and hitting me on both sides of my head with his open hands. I remember just having my hands up and my arms beside my face, trying to protect my face from those blows. But I just wasn't strong enough. He was still hitting me and I couldn't stop him. I have no idea how long this went on, but it went on until I blamed my siblings for not listening to me. I have no idea what he was talking about, but I remember as soon as I told him that my siblings didn't listen to me, he stopped hitting me. He grabbed my hand, helped me up, and while still holding my hand, walked me up the stairs to their room. I was 14, so my brother was 4, and my sister was 6. I remember him whipping them, I think, with the belt, and I guess I was just supposed to watch them getting whipped. And then he explained to all of us when the parents aren't home, I was in charge because I'm the oldest, and that they needed to listen to me. I don't remember any specific screams or sounds of them being whipped by that belt, but I do believe the sounds of those cries still subconsciously haunt me. One time I got triggered at a rabbit show. We show rabbits and raise and breed them. 2 small children were running around and screaming. I don't know if they were just having fun or if they were in trouble. I couldn't tell the difference, and apparently my brain couldn't either because it was so alarming to me that I started crying. Now mind you, rabbit shows are overwhelmingly overstimulating. There's a lot of people, noise, and a gazillion things to pay attention to, and while all of this is happening, your rabbit show friends are talking to you. Also, you get up really early, and remember, I'm not a morning person, so you're exhausted before the show ever even starts. If you travel to a different state or faraway place, you really don't sleep well the night before. I don't sleep well anyway, even if we're close. So, when I'm overwhelmed and tired, I might be overly emotional in my responses. However, I do believe those screaming children conjured up some deeply hidden sounds in the recesses of my memories. In fact, the other day, I was outside doing rabbit stuff as usual, and I heard some children screaming a few houses down. I froze, looked around, and listened. I listened to see if they were happy or in distress, or if I needed to call the police. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, recommended for therapists like me who do EMDR therapy. I haven't read it yet, only up to the 3rd chapter, but in my training, they do talk about this phenomenon. I'm also listening to another book about rewiring your brain and doing something differently other than trauma responding. With God's help, I do plan to eventually, hopefully, respond differently to alarming sounds. The crazy thing is that God knew all along. I'm a counselor, and sound involves listening. So I think this was all part of my training so that God could give me the gift of counseling, so that I could become a really great listener. Now I just have to work on being slow to anger and slow to speak. I'm a work in progress. Like I said earlier, this depression stuff is new, even though I always knew it was a part of me. God had to get my anger out of the way so I could focus on this depression. Every time something new is revealed to me about my own life and my current responses, and it seems abnormal to me, I say the David's prayer, search me and know me, O God. Every time I say this prayer, God gives me a deeper understanding of myself, my life, and my responses to triggers that still occur. I'm hoping that after today, I can begin to see myself and others better and more clearly. I pray for all of us that whatever burdens we have, we lay them at the foot of the cross and open up ourselves to be vulnerable to God's healing and revelation in our lives. Fast forward to current life. My husband gave his testimony not too long ago, on the same day, which I didn't know that was going to happen. He didn't want it to affect my testimony. So, one last thing I feel I need to share regarding the baggage I brought into my marriage, as well as managing my responses to my husband's baggage. Because of his struggles with his own addiction, for the first 5 years of our marriage, I often felt alone, rejected, and unloved. Once again, unimportant and unseen. I had to shut off 25% of my emotional self so that I could get through it and, frankly, stay in the marriage. I had to think long and hard about sticking it out. Of course, remember earlier my mom didn't stick anything out, and I didn't learn how to communicate from her, for sure. I knew I did not want to leave him. I believed that 75% of what we had was good. I'm not sure how I managed that time period except to just shut down. I tried to be enough, but it just didn't work. I couldn't compete with his addiction. He continued to let me know I was not a priority over his addiction. Ironically, my first husband was addicted to the same thing, but it was much worse. When I found out this was a problem in my second marriage as well, I thought to myself, how in the world did I do this twice? How did I not know? God, why didn't you tell me when I asked you to show me what I needed to know about this person? So for the next 5 years, my aforementioned PTSD responses and anxiety heightened. I often would wonder where he was, what he was doing, and couldn't go back to sleep in the mornings after he would get out of bed until he left the house for work. Once again, I'm not a morning person, but I was forced to be awakened by the pound of my own heart inside of my chest and the thoughts in my mind, wondering why he got up so early. This was a chronic condition for that first 5 years. Men's group saved my life. He started going to men's group, and I started to relax a little bit when I started to see God working in him. I still wonder occasionally why he gets up so early or what he's doing, but not every single morning like before when I wake up with him. Now I can go back to sleep in the mornings. Woohoo! That's huge, you guys. You just don't even know. I'm not worried about him or what he's doing. I do believe that God is working on his recovery, so I can start trusting that God has my back. It's not easy to trust God. I often feel alone in my feelings, and feeling alone and isolated can definitely lead to depressive symptoms. I don't want to be around anyone when I feel this way. I don't really like people. No, that's not, I read it that way earlier too. That's not what it's supposed to say. I don't really feel like people can help me when I get like this. However, I don't think staying isolated is the answer, or that being around people is actually the cure, so to speak. I think what the cure for depression is you have to break up your environment. You have to leave your safety of isolation. You have to make yourself be around people who care about you and your walk with God. Sometimes we can't face others when there's darkness inside of us, because darkness cannot hide in light. The smallest light is seen in a dark room, but darkness is not seen in a light room. So the light does what it's designed to do. It illuminates what is hidden in the dark. So when you have these low feelings, break up your environment. Leave the house. You don't necessarily have to be with people, but at least spend time with God. And with his sense of humor, he'll probably put a person in your path, even though you didn't intend on seeing anyone. Cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, encourages people to do something different and think differently. So we have to find ways to be proactive when it comes to fighting demon voices. Satan would love nothing more than to keep us down and isolated and alone. But God didn't design us to be that way. He knew that Adam was alone in the garden, so he gave Eve to him as a gift. People are gifts. They are. I don't always feel that way. In fact, I'm annoyed by people most of the time. But I know that I was created to be relational. And I know that every time I get around people, my whole demeanor changes, especially when I'm around people who are happy and who love God. My demeanor still changes even when I counsel people. They're not usually happy, otherwise they wouldn't be in my office, but I get to help them find peace, and that brings me peace. So ask God to help you find peace every single time you don't feel it. Life isn't supposed to be easy, because if it was, we wouldn't need Jesus or fantasize about being with him one day. Last part, if you need resources, I'm here for you. I can recommend counselors, I can encourage you. If you would like a list of helpful books to listen to or read, I can definitely help you on that as well. I hope something I said tonight was helpful, and just know you never have to feel alone.